Okay, so we're in Hilchos Niddah, Siman Tzadi. We've covered pretty much the various types of vesatot, various types of calculations that women calculate in order to figure out when they're expecting their period. Some are regular, some are irregular. And we talked about the different kinds of vesatot, how a woman can sense or how she knows that she's getting it, and the various halachot associated with the veset itself. Whether it's the veset of an adult woman, whether it's a young girl who's not an adult yet. We spoke a little bit recently about an older woman after menopause, a woman who's nursing, a woman who's pregnant, and the various details that concern those situations. If a woman's veset is interrupted as a result of all kinds of circumstances. In Siman Kuf Tzadik, we're going to get into a very, very relevant, somewhat relevant area in Hilchos Niddah, and that is ksomim, or ktamim, stains, or spotting. The reason I say or spotting is because a stain, perhaps we describe something as a nice sized stain, whereas spotting could be a lot of dots. And we're talking about dots or spots of blood. And as we will see, all of this, of course, is shayach. In other words, all of this can be a halachic issue that has to be presented. A woman who spots, a woman who sees a stain, whether it's on her body, whether it's on her clothes, it's on the bed and the linen and so forth, needs to be concerned. Needs to ask a shayla. Even though the halacha for ksamim is a little bit different than it is for veset, nonetheless, it is something that a woman has to be aware of. Many halachas are written about them. In this siman alone, we have 54 seifim, which comes to show you that there's quite a bit to learn about it. Not only in coloration, not only in location where the kesem or stain is found, but also in size. So before we get into the meat of the halachas, we need a little bit of an introduction, which is what Sif Aleph is about. So I'm going to read a little bit of it, and then I'm going to go to the Rambam. And they both pretty much quote from the Maskana, the conclusion of the Gemara. How do we address a stain? And the reason why this is a question is because the Gemara says it is very obvious, very apparent, from the psukim, the droshas in the psukim that talk about a niddah, that a woman becomes temeya only when she feels the blood going through her. And this tumah that affects the woman, the tumah of niddah or ziva, is significant in two areas. It's significant in the man-woman relationship, in how close they can be during the time that she's temeya because of the dam, and it's significant during the time of tumah and tahara, during the time of the Beis HaMikdash, when we had to concern ourselves with this area of halacha, of tumah and tahara, what is pure, what is clean and unclean. This made a difference too. Is she clean or not? Therefore, what she handles, what she touches, will it become tameh, or has it become tameh? She discovered that she's unclean. So when we're saying she's tmeya, we're saying that she's tmeya regardless, whether it's for the halachas of tumah and tahara, or whether it's for the halachas of niddah, as far as her husband is concerned. So min ha-Torah, as the Mechaber says, Dvar Torah, en ha'isha mitamea velo asura lebaro, she does not become tmeya, nor does she become asura to her husband, ad shetargish, until she feels sheyitzeh dam, or sheyatza dam, mid besara, that blood came out of her body. In other words, as we explained at the very beginning of Hilchos Niddah, there are various ways where a woman can feel that something is happening internally. But the ikar here is not just the feeling of what she is actually going through, is that she actually sees also, she also sees the blood coming out. As we will discuss later on, if she only felt something happening internally but didn't see any blood, well, then perhaps it's nothing or something. That we'll talk about later. But generally speaking, we're seeing the combination of the two, some sort of sensation internally, plus the blood coming out. So min ha-Torah, for her to be considered tmeya, it would have to be that she feels the blood coming out. V'chachomim gazur, the chachom midirabanan, that's what it means. It was by rabbinical decree. They decreed al keten shenimtza begufa, even though she does not feel the blood coming out, if she discovers a stain, a spot on her body, begufa, or bebigdad deah, or on her clothes, shehi tmeya, that she's unclean, vasura leba'ala, and she is forbidden from being with her husband. Afilu lo hirgisha, even though she did not feel. Afilu batka atzma, even after she discovers the stain, she goes and checks internally. Umatzat teora, and she finds herself clean. Nonetheless, still, the ketem may be tameh. We didn't say that every ketem is tameh. In other words, a ketem that is tameh will render her tmeya, and that tmeya will be in the same kind of tmeya as though she just got her period, which means usricha hefsek tahara. She would need the hefsek tahara. What's a hefsek tahara? That after the blood is gone by a regular woman having period, like let's say after 5 days, she checks herself before sundown. She puts her something internally. She removes after sundown. And she makes sure that, it's clean, that there's nothing left over from her period. So she can begin the Shiva Nekiyam, right? The Shiva Nekiyam today is also Midrabanan, right? A regular Niddah is just 7 days, and she's finished with her period, and she goes to the Tefillah, to the Mikvah. Today, we have basically two kinds of rabbinical decrees. We have actually three, you could say. We have the Shiva Nekiyam. She needs to wait on top of the number of days she saw blood, plus the requirement of 4 or 5 days, depending if you follow the Machaber, the Sephardic tradition, or the Ashkenazi, 4 or 5 days, or until the blood stops. If she's bleeding for 6 days, she can't do Hefsek Tahar and start Shiva Nekiyam. But usually on the average, let's say 4 or 5 days, after which she checks to make sure it's called Hefsek Tahara. In other words, she's doing a Hefsek, she's stopping, she's checking, and making sure that she's completely clean before she starts Shiva Nekiyam in the 7 days where she needs to be completely clean of any spots or anything. Otherwise, she has to start again 7 Nekiyam. Not the first 5 days, but a new set of 7 Nekiyam. And that can happen. So that's why these halachas are important, because spotting can come at any time, even during the Shivas Nekiyam. And the other area of the Rabbanon is the ketem that we're going to be talking about. So there are various takanas, whether you want to call it the Rabbanon or you want to go to the source of the takana, which is Benois Israel, as we said, the daughters of Israel, Jewish girls, Jewish women, accepted upon themselves to be extra careful even when they notice a small little stain. Well, obviously a small little stain, if it's all it is a stain, may not amount to a lot, but it's something to look into at least, to figure out, to try to figure out where it came from. So this is Midarabanan. Midarabanan, we're saying that even though she did not feel the blood coming out, and all of a sudden she discovers blood, even though she checks herself internally, she's still Tmeya, or she can be Tmeya, I should say, and she's going to require the same exact requirements that a Niddah needs after her period, and that is a Hefsek Tahara, which means Shetibdok Atzma, that she should check herself, and Timatzet Tehoran, that she will be found to be clean, Va'achar Kach Timne Shiv'a Nekiyim, and she will count 7 clean days, Chutz Miyom HaMetziyah, besides the day that she discovered the blood. So here the Mechaber doesn't tell us about 4 or 5 days. Okay? That's later on. We learn about that. Later on we learn about the additional takana, and we will see why. Why the Chachamim required of a woman to wait 4 or 5 days before she begins 7 Nekiyim. Now, I'm just going to add a little hint, without getting too involved in it, because I think we should leave it. It will be more appropriate for us to leave it for later on. There are times, however, that a woman does not have to wait a total of 11, 12 days. One is the typical kala, even though she's an Ashkenazi girl and she would wait 5 days plus 7. Kala, we're lenient that she can wait 4 plus 7. What do I mean by a kala? The first time around. Okay? After she's married. I did not mean a kala when she's first going to the mikveh before she gets married, because then these halachas don't really apply exactly the same. The requirement of the 4, she does not necessarily have to wait so many days before she begins Shiva Nekiyim, when she's engaged to become, a kala. Okay? In other words, when she's going to the chuppah. In other words, the issues that can exist with a married woman, and which is why we require up to 4 or 5 days before she begins something, do not apply to a young girl who has never been married, or who's about to get married. So I don't want to confuse you too much. The reason I mention this right now is because there are times that even with a married woman that ordinarily would require 4 or 5 days before she can begin 7. Now, when I say 4 or 5, means even if she only saw 2-3 days of blood, Hefsek Tahara will not be done until the 5th day is over.
Days of blood.
Exactly. 5 days minimum, then you start Shiva Nakim. So which means
and she can be, and she'll 5 days.
All of them. And then after the 5th day is over, she checks herself before sundown. She does something to check herself, and she has to be clean until after sundown. So she's doing it towards the end of the day, making sure that on the 5th day that she's really completely clean before she can begin Shiva Nekiyim.
What does she think?
That she has to wait 1 more day. Let's say she forgot to check herself, and it's already night. She lost 1 day. She has to wait the 6th day, and that could make a big difference whether she can become pregnant or not. That is, which leads to what I'm going to say next. A lot of women have a very short, well, it's not a short ovulation time or short time where they can become pregnant. I mean, everyone is more or less the same. But their timing of when they can become pregnant is very, very atypical. Let's just call it atypical.
I don't know what typical is.
So I'm going to explain what typical is.
Okay.
Right, exactly. Typically, a woman ovulates, of course, once a month. And during the time of the ovulation, give or take a day, she can become pregnant. Very simple. In other words, even though she was intimate the day before, even though she was intimate the day after, or during the day of ovulation, that time is very, very short, because if she's not intimate within a certain amount of time, nothing will happen. Just let's say it that way. Biologically, there will not be conception.
Ovulation take.
So up to 3 days approximately, it is possible. Does it happen? Not necessarily. Within a day or two, it's more likely. The further you go away from the ovulation, which would, by the way, the women have kits to figure that time if they want to try to get pregnant. They feel the temperature go up and so forth, so they know they're ovulating. By the way, that method of ovulation can also be used at times if a woman does not want to become pregnant.
So there's a to control?
That heter of using ovulation approach in some ways is more kosher, in some ways, more kosher than using something inside the body, other than pills, like a diaphragm. Now, the disadvantage of it is if it's a young couple, if they wait another day or two because of that, they're losing out being together. So it always has to be that the two consent, the two are in agreement that they're abstaining. This is the method of abstaining during the time that a woman can become pregnant, during ovulation. So if you know when that time is, it is pretty accurate, because it's only so many days and very, very few during a month that a woman can become pregnant.
So apparently 48 hours?
That's correct. So if the zera is there from before, okay, it could survive. It could survive that long. So therefore, that's why I said up to 3 days. If it was just got there before, 3 days.
Maybe a maximum of 3 days.
Yeah, but usually it's before or after, you know, that the relationship occurs. And no, because the ovulation happened the day before.
So then the egg
Okay, yeah. So which is what we need. We need one of the two to survive. Right. Very true. Right.
So it's total of like 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, but I mean, not really. You don't have so many days.
I mean, 3 days was before.
Right.
Then she ovulates 24 to 40 eggs are still surviving.
No, not the eggs. The eggs won't survive after that.
So that's
right. The zera survives so long. Right.
Okay.
So if the zera was there before, was there a little bit after.
So then, how many eggs are surviving?
Assuming that's right. We're assuming that the eggs have survived. Yeah, that need to check if you can check on that. Yeah, I don't recall what the average was, but it's about that. About 24 to 48 hours, I believe. Let me know. Yeah. So, given that this is a biological fact, there are times. 12 to 24?
12 to.
No, it was not beyond the 24?
No. Ovulation takes 12 to 24 after.
After the ovulation. Right. Ovulation takes or occurs.
Yeah. Ovulation for 48 hours.
Right.
And then after.
Right.
The eggs are there, they can survive 12 to 24.
Exactly. Okay, so that makes sense. Right. Okay.
And sperm, they say here, can.
Okay. The question is, will it be effective or not? But anyway, so there are certain, of course, concerns that Yeah.
You need a lot of sperm on standards released.
Exactly, that too. Yeah, there has to be left over. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, given these considerations, certain halachas apply because of that, and eventually we'll get to it as to why we need those 4 or 5 days regardless, because of the sperm being in there. And it's possible for the sperm to have come out, so the woman can become unclean as a result of that, but we'll leave it for another time. Nonetheless, it is possible that under certain circumstances, a woman who cannot become pregnant so easily because of these amount of days, and the ovulation begins a little bit too early by her before she has gone to the mikveh. So in other words, by the time she comes out of the mikveh, nothing can happen. Ovulation therefore beginning by her a little bit early. There are some leniencies that the rabbis allow for the woman to be cut down on the number of days that she has to wait. And there are other situations that we don't have to cut down on the days exactly, but it just turns out to be that they were not with each other for a variety of reasons. Let's say she did not go to the mikveh the first time, okay, when she was supposed to, and she's still unclean, and now she gets her period again. So she doesn't necessarily have to wait those days from before. You follow me? Because she was never with her husband, right? She was supposed to go to the mikveh last month. She skipped, so she's not clean. She's not with her. She cannot be with her husband. There's no chance that they will be together. Now she gets her second period. She doesn't have to necessarily wait the same amount of time that she ordinarily would have to. But that's assuming she doesn't see blood for 5 days, of course. This could help. There are situations where we can help a woman if she's ovulating early by enabling her to go to the mikveh a little bit earlier than usual. She will still need Shiva Nekiyim, remember. She still has to wait to start the Shiva Nekiyim once the blood is no longer there. But as far as, does she have to have the 5? Not always, not necessarily. Okay, I just figured I'd talk a little bit about that, even though we're going to talk about that separately another time.
A woman.
She had, remember, throughout her life,
I mean,
there's a certain amount.
One.
Yeah, but there's still eggs until, little by little, she runs out of it. Yeah.
No, but there are several eggs or just one?
Well, from what I recall, all you need is one, right? The sperm, for example, there's a lot of sperm, right? And all you need is for one to bring about the conception. So there is a release of one ovum, I think it's called. If it just happens to be that they meet, and of course Hashem allows for it, then that's what follows. But there are many eggs in a young woman. Hopefully, every month something will boost or become available, I should say, for conception, if that happens. If it doesn't, next month it happens again. It repeats itself. Yeah. All right. So Mechaber makes it very simple, that a kesem, a stain, would resemble midrabanan, a similar situation of a woman having her period. She would need to check herself, have hefsek tahara, as we said, begin the shiva nekiyim, and then go to the mikveh. Okay, so in quoting now from the Rambam, also based on what the Gemara says, this is all from the Gemara, that a woman only becomes smear minatora until she senses that blood is coming through her body, and if she did not feel anything, and she checked and somehow found some blood, even internally, forget about a kesem now, a stain, even internally in the prosdor, she is becheskas sheba behargosho. In other words, if the Rambam says that if she checks herself and she finds blood bifnim b'prosdor, it's becheskas sheba behargosho. In other words, even though she didn't feel, okay, she didn't feel anything, but she checked herself internally. In other words, she found dam b'prosdor. We say it is becheskas sheba behargosho. Now, that's all he says. In other words, he says that we assume that she had hargosha, but maybe she didn't feel it. Maybe she didn't realize it. In other words, maybe she just was distracted. Midivrei soifrim, midrabanan, that any kesem that she sees on her flesh or on her clothing, even though she didn't feel it, even though she checked herself and she didn't find blood, she's tmeya, and it is as though she found dam inside of her basar, internally. And this tumah, he says, is a suffix. What's the suffix? Shema, maybe this ketem came from the cheder, from the was inside, from the place where it's tameh. Maybe not. Maybe it came from another area. It's a suffix. So because of this suffix, the Chachamim were machmir. Now Rashi writes, what's the chumrah over here? What's the time of the gzeros of the Chachamim? Because for what we said before, it could be that she did feel, but lava daita, she wasn't really thinking about it. So the ketem is the Rabbanon, right? And l'chora, since it's a Rabbanon, one should say that, well, if it's a Rabbanon, then why not say suffix the Rabbanon l'kula?
Why doesn't we say?
Exactly. We're going to get to that. Very good question. So just Rashi just says that the time of the Gzera is because she could have felt, but she wasn't aware of it. She didn't pay attention to it. Still, Ksamim are the Rabbanim. Before we get to the question of Sfeika or even one suffix the Rabbanim, Tosfos says that the Gzera is because even though she didn't feel it, Mikol Makom Dam Nidois. She sees dam coming from that spot. It's dam nidois. In other words, it's from inside. In other words, where else could it have been? She wasn't going in the fish market, as we will see later on. If there's reason to believe that the dam could have come from somewhere else, then that is a leniency. Since K'samim are derabanan, we can be lenient many times, but not if we know for sure where it came from. In other words, if no other leniencies exist, which we haven't learned yet what they are, we're going to assume that this dam came from the place where it's tamim. So even though all it is a ketem, although she didn't feel, Tosfos says it's not because she could have felt, she probably felt, she wasn't just aware. He says because what she saw most likely is dam nidas. That's what's mashma from the Rambam too. Yeah.
So how do you say you don't need Hargasha at all?
Midrabanan. You don't need Hargasha. Exactly. So midrabanan, you don't need Hargasha. Just that internally, remember, internally, if she finds dam internally, it's becheskas shebo behargasha. We said before. It is assumed that she did have Hargasha, she just wasn't aware of it. I mean, as we learned in Siman Kuf Pei Gimel, if you recall, if a woman checks herself inside with an aid, with a cotton swab, right? And she sees blood on it as she's checking inside, she's Tmeya Midoraisa. Because we assume that she could, it's very possible that she could have felt, she just wasn't sure what she was feeling. It could be that she made a mistake. She thought she was feeling the aid as she was checking herself. In reality, at the same time, she was really feeling something go through her body. She could have made a mistake. So internal check is always going to be a doraisa to me. So if a woman just sees a ketem on her sheet, on her bed, on her linen, on her clothes, it's a durabana. But once you check internally, even though she's not getting her period, remember, we're not talking about a period anymore now. We're talking about seeing blood on the aid, on that which is checking her. If it's internal, even without Hargasha, we say it could very possibly have been that she did have Hargasha. But once it's outside of the body, from the drasha of the Gemara, that it says bibesora, until she feels it in her basar, and because later on there's another drasha, it says dam and not ketem, that we learn from this that she has to have, Minatora have to have felt it. In other words, even though we know for sure most likely it came from her, it didn't come from somewhere else, she's still Tahara because of the drashas of Bibesora. Okay, that's what the Gemara concludes. And that's how we hold. But we're Machmir. And for some reason we have to understand why are we Machmir, like you began to say, if at the very least, there's a Sfeika here. And that's he's not the only one, but the Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam asks this question too. Don't we have a Sfeika? And once you have a Sfeika, it should be mutter. What's a Sfeika? Safek, if it came from her. Who says it came from her? Just because she sees a stain on her shirt. Who says it came from inside the body? And even if you want to say it came from inside of her body, who says it came from the place where she's Tmeya? Maybe she has some sort of injury, or not necessarily an injury, but maybe she has it from another area of her body where it's not dam Tmeya.
But then you she felt, right?
Right, so we said already that she didn't feel. So it's derabanan. Okay, so we're going to get to the second question. Forget Sfeika, it's a suffix derabanan lekula, right? But before we get to that, what about Sfeika? So the answer that's mentioned is, because the Mishnah said that Mikol Malkom, nonetheless, the Chachamim were Machmir here because it's an Isur Chomor. or because she has no reason to suspect that it came from somewhere else. It's most likely from her body. So the Chachamim were machmir, unless she can say, you know what, I was just cutting meat. I was just slaughtering a duck, a chicken, or whatever. Not that she slaughtered necessarily, but she was by the shochet, right? And it could be that it got on her. If she can make that, can we use the word alibi for that? I should ask you. No, if she knows she went through a market where there's butchers, that is one of the heterim, the leniencies. I just went through there.
Reasonable.
Right. Obviously, it's not on her underwear, because they're more likely than not that it came from her. But it's in such a spot. So eventually we'll learn these halachas. That's what halachas of Ksamim are all about. Is there reasonable doubt? I guess I like that word better. Is there reasonable doubt that it came from somewhere else? So here, the simple reason why we don't have a sek is because there's no other reasonable doubt that it came from somewhere else, just from her body. So the Chachamim were machmir, to say that it's as though it came from her for sure, and therefore there's only one suffix. Which kind of blood is it? It was from her body. From what part of her body? So the Chachamim were machmir here. But what about if you have one suffix? It should be a suffix derabbanan lekula. If we say it's a derabbanan, it should be lekula. Then why are we machmir even with one suffix? So I saw the Noida Yehuda writes that just in the same way that for taharas, was had we been living in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, for taharas itself, she would be tmeya there without hargosha. For taharas, you don't need hargosha. Hargosha is by a niddah. If a woman is unclean or not, the fact she has blood, she's unclean. She touches something, it becomes unclean, right? Hargosha is just for whether she's prohibited to be with her husband. She a niddah, but she's tmeya. The fact is she's unclean. So just like by taharas, she's tmeya without hargosha, because we say the mekoimo is unclean, mekoimo is tameh, so it's a suffix d'oraisa then by taharas. So because over there she would have a suffix d'oraisa, we apply that chumrah also with her husband, that she's tmeya for her husband. In other words, that's one shot at least I saw in Noida Yehuda, that because by taharas it would be a suffix d'oraisa for taharas, we applied that Isser to her husband too, even though by her husband it's only a derabbanan.
By taharas?
No. By taharas it would be a suffix d'oraisa because you don't need hargosha. She's unclean. She has done. By niddah you need hargosha. She had to have felt in the Torah the blood coming out of her. When she doesn't have that feeling, it's a derabbanan. So it should be a suffix derabbanan lekula. So it says in the Noida Yehuda, but because in taharas, the hilchas taharas, there would be a suffix deoraisa. There's only it's not a suffix derabbanan, it's a suffix deoraisa, because we don't know where exactly it came from. It's coming from her body.
And taharas would all come from that same spot.
Oh, sure.
But
in that
the
same
presumption is it did.
Yeah, we're machmir.
Or the presumption is we don't know, but because of the deoraisa without hargasha, so
right.
They would machmir.
Yeah, but by niddah you need hargasha.
No.
So it's a derabbanan.
Yeah.
But since over there it's a deoraisa, we apply that isser for her husband too. In other words, just suggesting an explanation of why don't we say Safi Derabbanan Lekula. Well, because over there, in Dine Tahara, we are Machmir, right? We have to be Machmir. So the Raisa, so we say that here we should be Machmir too.
Does something, or does it sound
Yes.
as though since over there where it's over Machmir, the Rabbanan will also be Machmir?
No, not because it's a Derabbanan.
No, well, since over there,
Right.
where it's a Daraisa, we're Machmir, so therefore, because over there we're Machmir, it's a Daraisa.
Right.
Therefore here, where it's a Rabbanan, will also be Machmir.
Exactly. Even though we usually Safi Derabbanan Lekula.
It's something that occurs in Halachot as well.
Yes, yeah.
Because you have a Halacha that is similar to the Daraisa, you're Machmir, so therefore by the Rabbanan.
Well, remember when we learned Taaruvot and even Basar B'chala, we had situations where, generally speaking, you would be Mekel, but because of the Mekor of the Isur, the Ishtal Shelut of the Isur comes from a very more serious Isur. In other words, so we're stricter because of that. I can't recall right now a good example for it, but there are times that we look at the Mekor, what kind of an Isur is. In other words, even though right now it's a suffix, because its first phase, we're very, very machmir. Now that it has come about, now that it has somewhat changed again, we would say, well, now we have a new suffix. You have a new suffix. On the one hand, you also have a stricter Isser in an earlier phase. So we keep it the way it was. In other words, we don't.
Why is in Taharas? Why is Niddah isn't of Taharas?
Because they're similar. They're both dealing with the same makor. Just that there's a special drasha by Niddah of Hargosha. The Taz says, however, something very different. The Taz says, you know why you don't have a Sveik here? Is because Roiv Dam comes from the women. In other words, that she sees. Roiv Dam that comes out from the Isha, that doesn't have a Makkah, is coming from the Mekor.
Shalom is Asad, Niddah.
Tahara is during the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Jewish people were very, very careful with cleanliness, in other words, with purity. They had to immerse themselves in the mikveh and so forth before they handled things that were kodesh. Kohanim who eat truma had to be very careful, if they were to handle truma and they were not clean. So you had the halachas or the dinim of tuma and tahara, purity and impurity during that time of the Beis HaMikdash. You cannot today we can't enter certain areas of the Har Bayis of the Temple Mount because we don't have the red heifer. We are all considered tmeim metim. We probably have come into contact with dead people or somebody who was. So there's a boundary, a limit of where we can go beyond, where if we go beyond that point without being clean with the ashes of the red heifer, not just the mikveh, it's chayav koras. It's a very serious transgression.
But to the comparison, Niddah.
Right.
So if you have a problem with Tahara,
yes,
she would have to have her blood resulting from period. That would be what makes her Tahara?
Even as Zava. Today we don't distinguish Zava and Niddah, but any time a woman becomes unclean, for any reason, she touched a dead animal.
That would be Tahara. She can touch her husband.
She can touch her husband if he's in the mood of it. In other words,
That's with a dead animal.
Yeah, no.
Maybe it does, but that's a
right.
different
Yeah.
question. But so again, when we're talking about Tahara,
right,
there could be something impure that have nothing to do
with
blood
Niddah or Zava. That's correct.
Okay.
And even a man can become Tomeh. Right, as a result of handling a form of tumah. There are various forms of tumah.
But the tumah affect to a woman when it comes to Niddah.
No, right.
So,
but it would be the same. But it would be the same kind of tumah that would affect tahara and tumah and tahara.
So if a lady is today the temple and she had a kodshim, she would not be able to.
She would not be able to. That's correct.
But there would be other reasons behind the
Sure.
So,
yes.
so the Niddah has on tahara.
Yes, sure.
The state of the Niddah has.
It's a very heavy form of tumah.
Now, if she found blood that we know came from a wound that cut herself.
No, that's not a problem.
That would have tahara.
Nothing to do with tahara. No.
So the only time when blood on her body would have tahara.
Or a ketem, even though this is not her period, if that ketem has come from, we assume, it could have come from that same location internally from the woman's body.
Would that render her Niddah location?
But midrabanan. So she would be tmeya midrabanan because she did not have a hargosha. But she's still tmeya, you're right.
Okay, so wait a second. So if there was tam in respect to laws of tahara, and now we were saying...
Remember, in Tumah, in Hilchas Tumah, you even have levels of Sheni L'Tumah, Shlishi L'Tumah, Revi'i L'Tumah.
Okay, but that
right?
doesn't...
Different levels.
But that doesn't really have
depending if you're talking about Kodshim, or if you're talking about Truma, right? Depending on what you're talking
all
about.
Of these
different levels.
With our problem of the Rabbanan and
No.
Okay, so if she saw a ketem, but she didn't have a hargasha, with respect to tahara, so why are we machmir with respect to tahara as a deoraisa, which is the case of a suffix we're machmir, the tahara, when in fact it's a rabbanan regarding to the ketem?
Well, there's all kinds of tumah derabanan. This is just one example of a tumah that's derabanan without the hargasha.
According to Rabbi Yehuda.
According to Rabbi Yehuda, because we find that by this type of tumah, of where she has some doubts about where it came from, in other words, what part of her body, we are machmir because it's a suffix deoraisa, right?
But we just said it's no hargasha.
By tumah v'tahara.
But by tumah v'tahara, we said if it's came from, we said
legabe her husband.
Legabe
her husband.
We said about in tahara it's the rabbanan.
I made a mistake if I said that.
Oh.
What I meant was in the situation of dam.
Without hargasha.
Dam without hargasha.
By tahara, it's the raisa.
It's the raisa, suffix the raisa.
Oh, let's take away the suffix for a second.
Yeah.
Dam without hargasha by tahara, it's still raisa.
It's a suffix the raisa. Yeah.
Why is it a suffix?
Because we're not for sure 100% because we don't see it.
No.
You're not talking about ketem. You're talking about just dam coming out.
No, we're talking about ketem.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, if it didn't come from that place,
yes,
then she's not. We don't know that.
Right.
But when we don't know, there are always two possibilities. When we
Yes.
don't know something, this
Okay.
either did come from that place or it didn't.
Right.
If it didn't come from the place, it would be Tama Legabe Tahara.
Okay.
Only if it came, and we don't know that, but
Right.
only if it came from that place, would she be Tama Legabe Tahara.
Yes, she would.
But she had no heritage. She
Right.
didn't feel anything.
She would be Tama.
And now if she's Tama Legabe Tahara because it came from that place, but she didn't feel, she would be Tama de Oraisa.
The raisa.
Ah.
Yes.
Even without heritage.
Even without herga. Whereas by a nida, you need a hergesh, you need a hargosha, that she actually felt it going through for her to be Tamea de Oraisa. Right. The Rav that a woman sees coming from her, right, without a makah, she has no injury. Assuming she has no injury, the roiv dam coming out from a woman comes from the makor.
Now, if that's the definition,
So he says it's not a real suffix.
it's not a result.
Right.
The rove, that means by definition there is, because there's some that's not.
No, there's always one suffix. What's the suffix? What's the remaining suffix?
No.
If it's from there or from there.
Right.
But if it's from there, it came from the real spot.
But it's rove.
Right.
That definition says there's a suffix. Because there's some percent. And then he's saying, we don't care anyway.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. In Lemaisa, I agree with you. It's still a suffix. But he wants to say that you could apply roiv over here to make it one suffix instead of two sfeika. In other words, it's more likely to be a one instead of two, only because of this fact that the roiv. So he doesn't want to treat it as a real sfeika. As we saw in the halachas of sfeika, some of them are good, sfeika, and some of them are not so good. So he says, you know what? That's his explanation. This is not a real good sfeika. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah, in reality, the Niddah didn't say anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, in other words, why? Because it's still a sfeika. You know, the Kesef Mishnah says it's a sfeika. A lot of people are saying it's a sfeika. So the Taz will say, but you know what? The roiv. You know.
Why is it a sphinx? Why is it a double suffix?
Well, first of all, we don't know if it came from her body, right? It could have come from outside.
No.
And even if it came from her body, who says that it came from the place where it's tummy? Well, that's what the Taz is saying. It's usually
Would the Shach
come.
agree with that? No, not the Shach. The Shach was a whole different.
The shach, yeah. Yeah, we would have to look into it, you know.
Because the Shach edition,
Yeah.
for it to be a sphinx, the two sphinx.
Yeah.
It can't be that you have to get two different.
Right. So it's
So
Torah here.
maybe it came from the outside, and if it's from a body, maybe part of the body. The outside is also just saying. I mean, coming from a different part of the body, coming from the outside is really.
Yeah, the internal blood that we're
essentially
seeing. No, occasionally internal blood is not necessarily blood that is coming from the makor.
I'm saying that.
Because the Taz is the roiv it is.
But coming from the outside and
Yeah.
coming from a different part of the body are not.
Okay.
The thing is, either it came from the core or it didn't come.
Right.
But if it did come from the core, it could have come from one thing or another. Who cares? Not another secret.
Yeah, you know, it may not be on the sapith.
According to the Shah.
Okay, we would have to look into that. Yeah, that was just the Taz. Yeah. Anyway, what's interesting, however, is the second half of Sif Aleph reads as follows. So we said that such a woman who sees a kesem, she would have to check herself, do a hefsek tara, then count 7 days in the exact same way, 7 clean days. Chutz miyom hametzion, ki ilu ro aso vadai. Chemoshe yisbar lekamon siman kuftzeh. In other words, as though she would have actually had her period. Okay. Now, the last detail, the last line in the halacha reads as follows. He's quoting from the Trumas Hadeshen. Ve'im hirgisha sheniftach mekoro lehoitzi dam. If she felt that her makor opened up, in other words, she sees. Imagine, the best way to explain this is the sensation of having to urinate, go to the bathroom. In other words, you sense something is opening up. That's how they describe it. So she felt sheniftach mekora, her makor opened up, lehoitzi dam. Batka, and she after feeling something, she checked herself. Velo matza klum, and she didn't find anything. Yesh misha oimer, that's the Trumas Hadeshen, shehi tmeya, that she's unclean. Now that's a big chidush. What do we know? till now, that if she sees the blood, but there was no hargasha, pretty much everybody, kimat, that it's a derabana. Blood is there, it's just tmeya, but derabana, there's no hargasha. Comes along Trumas and says, you know what? If she felt the Mekor opening up, and she checks, doesn't see anything. This is possible, by the way. Yesh mishoever sheet meya. Now, what's interesting about the Mechaber is that in the Beis Yosef, earlier on in Hilchas Niddah, when he talks about different sensations, he says nobody really is concerned about this Truma Sadesh. It's an extra chumrah. The Beis Yosef himself. And here, he actually brings it in his halacha and says, Yesh mishoemer. Now, whenever he says Yesh mishoemer, obviously, he's already telling us that not everybody's going to be machmir about it. The language that he's using already tells you that, and you know what? A lot of poskim, especially the earlier ones, say that, we don't follow the Truma Sedeshin. It just happens to be that the more recent achronim are machmir with this kind of a situation. That if a woman actually felt herself like opening up, if she knows what that means, even if she checks herself and she finds herself clean, she's tmeya. Why? What's the svar that she's tmeya? Because it could be that she did have, or she did, in other words, feel or something, a tipa, some blood coming through her, which somehow dried up, got cleaned, somehow vanished with the other fluids or some other way. Because there's a hargasha here, and the hargasha is doraisa. Unless, of course, the hargasha may be attributed to something else. Some spasm that she's had, and it's not the real hargasha. But if you cannot attribute the hargasha to something other than what she ordinarily feels when she's seeing blood, even though she doesn't actually see the blood, he's machmir. Now, everybody seems to say that the Truma Sedeshin, well, not everybody, it appears to be that the Truma Sedeshin could have said this as it's a chumrah. In other words, it's a suffix, and you have to be machmir. It doesn't mean that he taught us this is the halacha for sure. It has to be like that. This is for sure what happened. But because there's a possibility that she actually did blood, just that she doesn't see it anymore, then you have to be machmir. So, today, as I said, the poskim are machmir in this case. But what's interesting is that the Beis Yosef in Siman Kuf Pei Ches earlier on says it's just a chumrah. That not most of the poskim in his days were not chayish. They were not concerned with this. Now, here we see the words niftach mekoira. Her Mekor opened up. If you remember in the very beginning when we learned Hilchas Niddah and talked about sensation, we said that there's three kinds of sensations. In other words, in the poskim, three kinds of sensations are brought down. What is a woman supposed to feel? Ptichas HaMekor is the more classic one. She feels as though something opened up in her. And everybody pretty much agrees that if you're dealing with the Truma Sedeshin and you're going to be machmir, it should only be Ptichas HaMekor sensation. The other two is that she feels that Niddah. In other words, she feels a trembling. She feels something shaking in her body. If you recall that. Niddah evareha. Her limbs begin to tremble. That's another kind of sensation, which would render her tmeya if she sees actual blood. But the question is, should we apply Niddah evareha for the Truma Sedeshin too? So some say no. Nifta, if she feels the real sensation, the classic one, or where she feels something opening up, okay, some poskim are machmir. But the other ones that were machmir when there's actual blood, to render her, to consider her tmeya doraisa, where even though she was not feeling something opening up, but she trembled, that's also called hargasha. Or the third one that's brought down, if you recall, is that she feels something of a liquid flowing through her. It's the flow. It's not opening up. It's not the trembling, it's a flow. Is that called a hargasha or not? Some say that's also a hargasha, or that is the hargasha. So there's three kinds of potential hargashas based on the various poskim explain what a hargasha can be. So here, the question is, do we apply these hargashas to the Truma Sedeshin too here? That if she felt something, she saw something, imagine she feels something flowing through her. She checks herself, nothing. Should we also be machmir? No. I think I wrote it down over here. We have Nizdazeu evareh, her trembling, the chokhmas odom is mekel. If she feels something flowing through her, the bach and the chokhmas odom are machmir, the chasam sofer is mekel. If she didn't see any blood, we're talking about. Okay, that's a chumrah in itself, the Truma Sedeshin. So the question is, do we have to also apply the other kinds of sensations? We will see later on in another Siman, I'm just going to mention it now real quickly, that the poskim also deal with the issue of a woman who somehow noticed blood coming out as she was urinating, or close to after the urinating, before or after. The Chavas Das says on that one also has to be choishesh, that this is a re'iyah with hargasha. And some say that this is not a chash d'oraisa at all, because it's not normal for a woman to see blood while she's urinating. Usually blood does not come out when she urinates. So therefore, I think the vast majority are not machmer in that case. Consider that a hargasha of any sort. We'll see that later on in Kuf Tzadik Aleph. Everything is possible. You're right.
No, because that sounds like...
It could be, yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah. The question is, if it's coming from the makor, is that called a hargasha? I mean, what is it exactly if it comes out with the urine? Now, as far as the Truma Sedeshen, there's a question in the person if we can also apply that chumrah, or be more lenient, with a woman who's mesulekes damim. Remember, last time we discussed a category of women called mesulekes damim, that she's not supposed to be seeing any more blood, either during menopause or other kinds of situations, pregnancy, even though they're slightly different, pregnancy, nursing woman, and menopause. Right? Menopause means it's completely gone. Some say that if she did have such a sensation even then, you would have to be machmer, but I think the majority are mekel. I didn't go through all the poskim, but by mesulekes damim, there's quite a few who are mekel that we don't apply the chumrah with trumas because she's not expecting to see it. If she checked herself and she didn't see, just because she felt something doesn't mean that we're going to be machmer to make her tmeya. Now, crazy place over here brings down the din of Truma Sedeshen, that when he says that she checked herself and she didn't see anything, it's only after a while. According to the crazy place, it's only if she checked herself after a little while. Well, then you could say, had she checked earlier, she would have seen something, and by now it's gone. But perhaps the Truma Sedeshen would be moided that if she checked right away, and she doesn't see anything, that she would be okay. But I think a lot of poskim, those who are machmir, don't distinguish whether she checked later, or even if she checked right away, the Truma Sedeshen would be machmir. And then there's a question of what does it mean she checked later? We'll see that in Sif Nun Aleph. In other words, if she checked much later, there's no question about it. That it could be that it's just dried up, it's no longer there, or it's lost. But if she checks b'toich shiur veset, in other words, within mamish, a very, very short time, could be she should be clean. Anyway, the Chavas Das, Niddah Yehuda, Aruch HaShulchan, say that the din of the Truma Sedeshen is whether she checked even right away or whether she checked later on. But there's one interesting detail, and with this we'll finish for today, and that is if she did check and she did not find blood, but she did find other liquid that is clean. Let's say she checks herself, and she sees fluid, but it's not blood. It has a mara, it has the appearance of something clean. In other words, the din of the Truma Sedeshen, when she checks herself, she found nothing. So then we suspect it could be, it's no longer there, it could be it was small, she didn't notice it, or if it was later on, it for sure dried up. But what if she checks, and she sees, this is what it is. Something is coming out, but it's not blood. So if it's a maret tohor, and we learned a little bit about this in Kuf Peiches, when she checks and she sees something clean is not blood. So here there's achronim that say that time is a factor too. In other words, even though it's true that if she checks right away and she sees maret tohor, and there was, that's all it is, then for sure she is clean. If she didn't check right away, it could also be a problem. So, but the crazy place in the Tzemach Tzedek seems to say that even if she checked a lot later, if she sees inside her body that it's something clean, she doesn't have to worry about it, because she sees something, and that something is clean. But I did see that they say that sheer veset, ideally she should check within a sheer veset is 2 to 3 minutes. So some have a tzorechiyun as to what the time is that is allowable for her to check herself and see if she's clean or not, if she sees something. Because inside the body they claim it's always some fluid, it's always wet. So it could be if she waits too long, it's too late. The Shevet HaLevi, I believe I saw, writes something about if it's a half an hour later, it's too late, you can't rely on it. But if it's within a very short time that she checks herself inside and she sees, that's all it is, it's not blood, it's a maritor, it has the appearance of something clean, something yellow, I don't know, transparent, not red, then it would be okay. What's interesting is the Aruch HaShulchan says, but even me'es le'es, on this one he says even me'es le'es it's okay. And same thing with Taras Abayis. I think the reason why they're lenient with that is because the whole Truma Sedeshin is a chumrah. There's no blood, we don't see any blood. In this case, she did see something, that something is clean, even though it was a lot later, we're not going to be machmir so much. So even though there's a hargasha, but once she checked herself, she didn't, even though it was later on. And the reason for that is because when she checked, she saw something else. Had she not seen anything, then it could be a problem. Well, by the time you checked, it's gone. It dried up. It got lost there in the body. With the rest, it could have been a little bit. But if she sees something that has a marit tohar, that's something that appears to be clean, then she can attribute it to that, and then there's no reason to be machmir at all. Okay, what we'll do, Mitzvah Hashem, next week, as long as we're here and Mashiach didn't come yet, and whatever, we're going to be talking about a tinoikis, that a lot of these halachas don't apply to a tinoikis, a young girl. And then we're going to get into the actual size. What's the size of the stain? What constitutes a problematic stain? Coloration, location, and size. These are the three things. Coloration, location, and size. And Mr. Hashem, this is the real important area of Hilchos Ksomim that women who deal with this, who see this, and some of them have a lot of problems with it. Some of them don't, occasionally, because of some traveling or something that, jumped or something. Because remember what we learned before, it makes no difference if it's be'oines, in b'shkoga, it happened somehow, she did something. The fact is, we see the blood. If something is the best or not is a different question, but tmeya. So once we consider this being not a good location, and the coloration is right, it's almost irrelevant how it came about. As long as it came from internally. Once we, of course, can make the reasonable doubt that it had possibly come from somewhere else, then that's a whole different story. So this is where it becomes a little bit more intricate, and the Mitzvah Hashem will get to that.